Sometimes when we think we are doing everything correctly, following all of the rules and just going about with a sense of duty and purpose, that we are going to accomplish our goals. And sometimes we actually accomplish our goals, and then we find that once we get there, oh, this does not feel so good. Well, today we are going to be listening from the amazing Steph Gaudreau, and she is going to share how she went from systemic duty to inspired intuition. Aloha! Welcome to the Savvy Luminary, an astrology podcast for entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Leslie Tagorda, an Aquarius boss woman, a brand designer, and business astrologer. I help visionaries, spiritual entrepreneurs, and impact makers just like you reach your highest potential and become the luminaries you are star charted to be. Hey everybody, Leslie Tagorda here, and I'm so excited to bring this really wonderful interview today with Steph Gaudreau. Oh my goodness. I first met Steph. She reached out to me. I was so amazed when I heard from Steph. She scheduled an Astro Brand meeting with me, and then we were in the same mastermind and just all of these wonderful connections. And I remember when I first, peeked at her Instagram, I was just like, oh my gosh, I was like just so overwhelmed with all of that she had created. She has like this massive following, an amazing podcast about nutrition and moving your body. And she is also an author of a best-selling book, Core 4. So Steph has a lot of Pisces energy and a lot of Capricorn energy. And so this gives this kind of conflict of like, hey, I want to like achieve and like stick to the system because this is the step-by-step way to get there. And then following your intuition and her deep wealth of compassion and connection to her intuition. And so today she's really going to share with us about this path, about how she's been able to reconcile both of these kind of not really necessarily opposing energies, but these very different energies in her life and her business, and how through her vast experience of like success and visibility, and if those things not always what it means, right? Like what you initially put it out to be, and how she has gotten to where she is now, where she is living in this alignment and trust with her deep intuition. So I hope you enjoy this wonderful and candid episode of how Steph has learned to live with this wonderful wealth of compassion in her life, and how she's been able to take her vast knowledge of science and nutrition and blend it in with her deep wisdom of inspired intuition to teach others how to trust in themselves to make aligned choices based on their own personal needs. I hope you enjoy Steph as much as I love her and get a lot out of this because she has so much to share. I have all of her links on the show notes at thesavvyluminary.com, but definitely check out her podcast, Listen to Your Body podcast with over 3 million downloads, and check out her book, The Core 4. 4 is the number 4. And if you're interested in learning more about how to break up your cycle of dieting or duty based working, definitely check her out, her site at stephgaudreau.com, and learn how you too can trust in your intuition. All right, let's dive into this interview with the amazing Steph Gaudreau. I'm so excited to bring on what I like to call a friend and a colleague and just a generous soul, Steph Gaudreau. She's a wonderful Pisces sun, Capricorn moon, and Capricorn rising. I always see her as her glowy, dreamy Pisces, but somehow identify more with the Capricorn, right?
Somewhat begrudgingly. I am a very kind of goals oriented, structured person, and yet there is that soft, gooey core of me who is the sort of Pisces energy that comes out, and it can sometimes feel a little bit like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde in my mind, where it's or just a very strong duality in who I am, where yes, I like to be competitive and I like to be successful and feel successful, and I love to set goals. But at the other hand, I'm also always thinking about the big picture, and very, I think of all these big questions, and sometimes I'll ask my husband, these big existential questions, and I'm like, do you ever think about this? And he says, no. That's where a lot of my dreaminess goes most of the time.
Yeah, if you look at Steph's chart, she has her beautiful sun and Mercury all in the second house in Pisces. And your work that you do kind of really bridges this gap between that intuitive interconnectedness of Pisces and then that groundedness embodiment of Capricorn. Can you
Mm.
share with us a little bit of exactly what you do and kind of that path to where you've where you are now, because it's been a long windy road, right?
It really has. I mean, to go as far back as sort of when I started my professional career, I was a high school science teacher. So I've always been very grounded in that, and looking at the how things work and the way our bodies work and why that's important, and helping people understand. And I've always been a teacher at my core. And then I left the teaching world in 2013 to start my own business. I was food blogging on online, and I decided that I was going to, after about a year of thinking about it and kind of taking my slow time, I decided I was going to go all in on that job. And it really led me down this path of coming to terms with the ways in which I had been very restrictive with the way I was eating and in my relationship to exercise. So I've been an athlete and somebody who competed in sports my whole life.
Yeah.
And for me, yes, movement and like enjoying sport and like being physically active and like feeling energy flow through my body is just there's something very awesome about that. And I really love it. But at the same time, and I don't know if it's the byproduct of society or, some of that Capricorn energy in me, it became very much about proving myself. And it became very much about proving my worth to other people and making my body smaller for the sake of it being smaller and not being happy with myself. And so
Mm.
food and movement, instead of being really beautiful ways to incorporate wellness and do it in a way that's offers a lot of freedom and a lot of liberation and a way to really experience life, it became very constrictive, very restrictive, and very unhealthy, right? So my relationship with food and exercise became very unhealthy. And so throughout this process of running my own business online and having a food blogging website, I sort of started to have my eyes open to a lot of this, whether it was in 2017 when the the rally happened in Charlottesville, and a lot of us, were pretty late to the party with understanding how things like white supremacy are still very alive and well in this world, and how that impacts wellness and that impacts fitness
Mhm.
spaces and nutrition spaces, and like who's at the table having these conversations and who's not. And so there, like, social justice was kind of coming into things for me, and then also just sort of learning about how am I going to, why am I constantly fighting against my body, right?
Yeah.
why am i not why am I not able to listen, or why am I not willing to listen, or why am I um, really not paying attention to even the signals that my body is sending me that maybe I'm not eating enough food, or I'm
Yeah.
overtraining and really running myself pretty ragged. And so I think that has really led me to a point of, I still, yes, like I love talking about nutrition and how we can nourish our bodies. And I love talking about movement in the context of like getting stronger and what that affords us.
Hmm.
But I really had to bring my own intuition into it and learn how to do that for myself so that I could help other people, particularly women. That's primarily who I work with, come to a point where we can understand how we can use food as nourishment, use movement to express ourselves, and like it can be really fun and enjoyable and beautiful. But if it becomes our life and it doesn't help us to live our life,
Yeah.
then that can be a problem, right, for so many people. And just to give you an example, um, it's something like 75% of women have some form of disordered eating and or disordered relationship with food. And that's just,
Phew.
it's a lot, right? It's a lot
Yeah.
of moving away from either purposefully not using our inner wisdom, or because we've been taught that we can't trust ourselves.
Hmm.
It's a way that women have been suppressed. It's a way that we have been subsumed by things like the patriarchy. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of depth to these discussions and these conversations. But I think ultimately what I'm here to do is to help people also bring in a little bit of that inner wisdom, that
Yeah.
intuition, and say, you know what, if I am going to do a workout today, that's great, because I'm doing it because I love to move my body and honor my body in that way. But do I need to go the hardest today? Can I do something that's more fun today? Can I do it in a way that makes it really fit into my life and I'm not bending myself into a pretzel to try to do this workout that doesn't really work for me? So really
Yeah.
helping women find ways to eat and move that are supportive of the life that they want to lead, and not feeling like it's restrictive, prescriptive, constricting, and outsourced to everybody else, and what they say is right.
Yeah. If I could just reflect back of all, like just the huge journey, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, the idea of coming from like, looking at your chart and just like validating all of these kinds of levels that you've really up leveled since your time of, you know, since being a competitive athlete to being kind of, would you call yourself like a body and nutrition coach now? Like what?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
there's so much in that, like just like how
Mhm.
you help people really trust in their intuition. And the way I see you, and just to like reflect back, is like, so it started with the root of science, right? And like really
Mhm.
figuring out how things worked and how your body processed nutrition and how your body grew stronger. Like at the seed, like that's like still like the heart and soul of what you love doing, especially looking at your chart with that Capricorn rising, right? And you have your
Yes.
Venus and Moon in Capricorn, like right there. And so, like, of course, like when we're younger and we're not really, we're always operating in our energies, right? And what you described to me was totally like that shadow version of
Mm.
Capricorn, right? Like the duty of and the responsibility. And then if we're listening to all of that outside noise that's coming at us from the patriarchy or from like colonialism or from all of that, it's all integrated, right? It's like
Mhm.
people trying to control our bodies, right?
Yeah.
And if we're not conscious of that and we're listening to all those things, then that sense of duty from your Capricorn rising, and then this your Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, being in your eighth house, right? That can like dive really into that place of like, okay, restriction, constriction, making it smaller, like duty, like I need to exercise every day, I can only eat so much, so many calories, and it goes in this like terrible cycle, especially with your moon, your emotional self being there, and your Venus in Capricorn also is like the aesthetic, like, okay, well, I have to conform, right, to this certain aesthetic. And that is like some really heavy stuff for
Yeah.
for young stuff to do. But then I love how then also recognizing the Pisces, right? Like just to reflect back, there's the shadow side of Pisces is avoidance and hiding and
Mhm.
addiction, right? And
Mhm.
so like pre who you are now, like working in the shadow of Capricorn and Pisces just like created this real what would you call it, like this heavy weight, just this like this terrible like shadow,
Mm.
right, of just like they were feeding into each other. But in beautiful reality, it's like all of that you've gone through to feed into what you now know to be true that you are sharing with the world, there 75% of women need who have problems with, diet culture or eating or nutrition or just like not able to trust their body, they need you to teach
Mhm.
them like the actual like aligned way and that
Mhm.
intuitive way, and just everything that you've created now about listening and tuning into your body. Oh my gosh, it's such a gift. That thank you for going through that hell and back to teach
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting process. And I think, to kind of reflect what you said, there was definitely a point at which I sort of switched so I used to race mountain bikes, and I was very much into triathlons and running long races and things like that. And I got to a point at about 2011 where I thought, I can't really do this anymore, right? And I realized when I switched to strength training, and I was able to, for the first time in a long time, kind of decouple myself from um, athletics, sports, fitness, movement as a way to solely control the size of my body. And I was able to kind of move into a more expansive space of, you know, what my body could do, and really coming at it like from a place of, and it didn't matter what my body looked like, because people would say, yeah, but you can like ride long distances and run long races and climb big hills. And I would say, right, but there's still underneath it is the desire to control, the
Yeah.
desire to make smaller. And I realized for me at that point, sort of 2010, 2011, that I was using endurance training specifically as a way to really kind of run away from, and literally, and avoid my
Yeah.
problems and avoid dealing with some of the deeper stuff. Because there's anybody that's ever done training of that type can recognize that it can be really painful, right? And
Yeah.
so it was a way for me to kind of like introduce and then deal with pain in a certain way. And so
Mm.
that was, it was nice and neat and compartmentalized, and it was done when I was finished riding, and it was a way for me to avoid some things that were going on in my life at that time. And yeah, it's been a really it's been a process of like unwrapping and like unlayering those different shadow energies. And I mean, it's still an ongoing process, right? We still are humans living in a world where we're taking things in and seeing things in new ways and learning about ourselves. And so I think that process never ends. But I really want to help women in particular understand how nutrition can be something that we use to nourish ourselves. It doesn't have to be one of just deprivation and restriction, and how we can embrace this idea of like what our bodies can do, because, or what our bodies allow us to experience in life, right? Our bodies
Yeah.
are a vessel,
Yes.
without it being, I need to make up for what I ate, or I need to shrink myself to a particular acceptable size and according to society standards. So it's kind of a reclamation. It's a reclamation of these things that we're doing it for us. We're doing it in a way that, I mean, nutrition science and exercise physiology are what they are, right?
Yeah.
But can we bring in some of our personal experiences, some of our intuition, our inner knowing, our inner wisdom, our life experience, our lived experience, and marry the two together in a way that's really gives back to us, instead of being something that stresses us out or makes us feel less than?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I love all of that, that idea of like the reclamation. And then if we can like transmute the kind of shadow side of the Capricorn of this sense of duty,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's now this sense of like longevity. Like how can we live in our bodies for the like Capricorn is about like the time lord, right? And like a
Mm-hmm.
long life. How can we live in our strong bodies and be mobile and have structure and be able to sit up tall for as long as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just to use our body, as you said, as that vessel, like for
Mm-hmm.
our spirit. I just love that. So, one of the things that I get really curious about is that, so since you started off as a food blogger back
Mm-hmm.
in 2011, but you always had this sense of like sharing and contributing your knowledge wherever you were in that path. I mean, when we're
Mm-hmm.
going through the shadows, right, we don't necessarily know that we're in these dark places or like, but you're like, I'm going to show up and I'm going to share all of this information. Can you tell us a little bit of like what inspired you to share, and looking at that longevity for, over 10 years of sharing this and building this vast audience that you have right
Mm-hmm.
now?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I actually started blogging in 2008 or 9, roughly, when I was racing mountain bikes, and I would go all over the West Coast and do all these races in these ride in interesting and beautiful places. And
Mm.
I always brought with me, I had this tiny little camera that would fit into my kind of pocket on my camelback, my hydration pack that I would
Mhm.
wear. And I just loved to capture those moments. And then I would write about my experiences, share pictures of the beautiful places that I had been. And I think that for me, and sometimes I feel like this maybe gets me into some kind of trouble, but for me, I am a person that wears my heart on my sleeve. You
Mhm.
will probably always know how I feel. I can't hide it. I'm very transparent, and I try to have discernment with sharing things in my life that maybe I'm grappling with in a way that is not, it's very raw, or it feels like I haven't healed that particular thing yet, because I don't ever want to like unknowingly put that burden on another person to
Yeah.
carry my pain. But all that being said, I started blogging initially as just a way to share, right? To put it out there. And I didn't care at the beginning, is anybody reading this? It was for me, more or less.
Yeah.
But over time, as I started to include more food recipes, because I always love to cook, and I started to put food recipes on my blog, and somebody said, you should start a food blog. And I thought, of course, just what you do, right? This is 2010-ish, where blogs weren't the things that they are today. It was very different.
Yeah.
And so I started this part-time food blog where I would blog on the weekends and share recipes. And it was again just a way to put it out there and have it as a little, reminder for me of what I liked making and things like that. But over time, it's really it's grown. And with that has come this interesting change, which is sometimes, at the beginning, everybody always says, when your business is really small or when you're first starting out,
Mhm.
like, experiment, try all these new things, because there's fewer people watching, and you probably feel less of a responsibility because you don't have
Mhm.
as many people watching you. And over the years, it's gotten really interesting as I've rebranded in 2018, as I've changed my podcast name and slightly shifted my focus. And there have been a lot of twists and turns along the way. And it's coming back to that commitment to be as transparent as I can, to
Yeah.
share what I can, so that way people also feel like, I don't need to give anybody permission to do anything, because we're all autonomous, human beings. But at the same time, there is something very powerful about sharing your experience and validating what other people are going through, or validating the idea that you can change and it's okay, even if you have a lot of eyes watching
Yeah.
you. Um, it's been hard because I haven't wanted to disappoint people. I mean, I take that, I have that sense of duty that is just very deep in me, of like, really wanting to get people to the point where they're learning and they're experiencing the results that they want to experience. And sometimes I take on a lot of that responsibility, which kind of gets me, I
Yeah.
had to be kind of clear about that for myself. But there is that element of, if I share what I'm going through, and growth and transformation have always been really central to who I am and learning. I feel like, that's it, like being an educator is not only in my kind of like intergenerational family lines. It's like in my DNA. I was a teacher for 12 years before I started doing what I do now. And there's this really great way of thinking about education. And I learned this very early on. Like, we can think about teaching other people and filling them up as if they are an empty vessel, or we can think
Mhm.
about igniting their own sense of curiosity and wonder. And like, that can also be the job of the teacher, the educator, right? Is not to necessarily just fill you up with knowledge, but is to ignite whatever that is in you, and get you curious about your own growth, your own transformation, your own learning. So it's a very different way of looking at education, and why teaching can be so powerful. So
just like we all are here at some level here to teach, right?
mhm,
And share information. And instead of just like filling somebody's vessel, like with just like stats where, that sense of duty then takes hold, right? Like, oh, I
yeah,
have to remember all of these things. And, but then, offering information so people can find their own path and what you
yep.
said, like igniting their curiosity. So
Hmm.
I had a question about, because like you have this sense of duty and this sense of responsibility. Thank you to your, Capricorn rising and your moon,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And
Yep.
so you're mentioning about how hard it gets to shift when you have so many eyeballs now. And
Mm.
so, you've written books, you have like a huge podcast with like millions of downloads, you have like an Instagram like following that is like beyond anything that I've seen. I'm looking at your Instagram account right now with over 183,000
Hmm.
followers. Like,
Yeah.
wow. Um, what does that feel like now when you're creating content, that sense of responsibility and being able to shift when your Pisces sun is like, wait, it's time to go into this another dreamy place?
Yeah, I'll tell you this much. It comes with it feels like a double-edged sword, to be
Yeah.
really, honest about it, is that again, I think to model that we can take in information and we can find new perspectives, and we're going to learn things throughout our lives that cause us to shift the way we see the world and our own perspective on the world and what we know to be important and true for us. I think that modeling that is very powerful, because it says, you know what, if we take in, for me, if I'm like, I take in new information and I'm, for example, diet culture. I never really, like, I have felt the effects of diet culture growing up,
Mhm.
but because it is the system, it's invisible and it's very tangible at the same time. And the way I experience diet culture is very different from, potentially somebody who's in a much larger body from me. So I only have my lived experience. But when I
Right.
learned about diet culture and I learned about the origins of diet culture and how it plays out for people who have different social identities, I guess I took that information and I thought, well, I can either pretend that this isn't a thing, or I can choose to do something about it and to help educate or to help point people in the direction of folks in the world who are doing, you know, this work to really help marginalized people and to be
Yeah.
those voices that are saying, hey, we're marginalized by this. Like, we need everybody's help in really
Yeah.
overcoming diet culture. So that was one example where I guess I had a choice, and I could keep going and pretend
Yeah.
that didn't happen, it's not a thing, or I could shift my worldview and that would inform my content. On the other hand, sometimes I feel like I mean, we think that everybody sees everything that we do and they're like, we're under this microscope, right? Because we're in our businesses and thinking about
Mhm.
our businesses all the time. And I'm thinking, oh, I quite often will, like, I need to try on, for example, certain ways of saying things to feel if I'm really feeling it. So if I write the little like description in my bio, or I write a copy on my website, quite often I will write something and then I try it on for a while. And if it doesn't resonate with me on that energetic level, I change it.
Yes. Oh my
But,
gosh.
but I always feel like people are going to think, this woman is bananas. She's changing her stuff all the time. She can't figure out who she is. Why are we going to listen to her? Why should we trust her? She doesn't even know what she's saying. And so there is that sort of shadow side that comes along with that flexibility and fluidity and that
Yeah.
desire to grow and change. Is why can't I ever feel like I find that
Yeah.
the thing, the stability and the messaging and the consistency? And so it is really trying to work with those two energies.
Do people
And
give you flack when they see you shifting things?
no,
Okay, so
it's
you're
all,
you're
yeah.
putting you're building that in your mind.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. For sure, for sure. And I mean, I
All
have made some,
self-talk.
right. I have made some really big shifts in my business, over the last couple of
Yeah.
years, like rebranded in 2018. And it was interesting to me because I feel like, I've been talking about this for the last 2.5 years or 3 years. And when I surveyed people on my Instagram stories, like, hey, do you know the story about why I'm no longer, doing this website? And it was like 83% of the people said they didn't know. And I just thought, oh my gosh, like, and it's you're right. Again, it comes down to like when we're in our business and doing our thing, we feel like everybody is putting us under a microscope or a magnifying glass. And I'm sure that could be possible in a few circumstances, but for the most part, it's not. Everybody is living their own lives and doing their own thing and busy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel that push pull quite often where I think, okay, I'm going to grow and lean into this. And one of the things I'm considering doing is kind of going back to weaving strength and strength training back into what I do, and I love it. And I don't even really know why it was one of the things I kind of moved away from. I do like my way of looking at the world and looking at people's health and things like that is very multifaceted, and
Yes.
it's difficult for me to just laser in and say I only do this one thing, and so I feel that pull quite often to not let myself get too distracted by all of these fun things.
Yeah.
And I'm a
Well,
learner and a curator, and I love to, weave in all these different pieces together. But at the same time, I feel like, people just need to know you for one thing. So that's
uh,
where it challenges me.
yeah, I don't believe in that. That is not what that my thing. Like I love the multifaceted aspects of it, right? Like I want to like dig back into just your work with when you talked about this kind of like dissecting diet culture and really looking at like, well, I only have my perspective,
Yeah.
yet I want to share the voices of many perspectives. And like you've done so much work, just, like you are a white woman and you've done really like a lot of work in the social justice arena and like bringing in like lots of different voices to share different arenas. And I want to acknowledge that because again, your all your Capricorn energy, it's like if it's not a big challenge, like you could have decided like, oh, I'm just not going to go there, like nobody wants to listen to me as a white woman talking about all these other social matters and like body positivity, or I don't even know if that's a thing anymore. Body acceptance.
Yeah.
But you're like, no, I'm going to take this challenge because
Mhm.
for you, if something is not a big challenge, like it's not interesting to you, right?
Yeah.
Like
Well, this is why I create challenges in my life. There's a blessing and a curse to it of like,
yes.
if it's a challenge, then like I'm going to attack it and I'm going to keep working on it and I'm going to be persistent. And those little goat hooves of mine are going to just keep climbing that hill. But then sometimes in my life, I think I create unnecessary challenge for myself as a way
Yeah.
of staying busy or, like proving that I can do things. And so that's something that I continue to try to be aware of. And, for me, just to kind of go back to what you said, being someone in this space who does have a lot of unearned privileges, it's been a really interesting and, often at times challenging thing to feel like, what is my role here? Where do I fit in? And
Yeah.
I can't, I did a podcast recently about like, the question was, is body positivity for you? And it was trying to open the discussion, especially with other people who might look like me, about what is the difference between a positive body image and what is between that and the body positivity movement, and where did the
Mhm.
body positivity movement come from and who is it really for? And so I think that one of the main ways I can be of service is to help raise awareness.
Yeah.
And then when people are a little bit more aware, to say, okay, now I want you to go, like, you can go learn more from this person who has that lived experience, right? You can go learn from this person who is a, a teacher, an educator in this area, and this is their professional expertise and their lived experience. Like, go pay them, right?
Right.
Go learn from them. But to kind of raise the collective awareness about some of these things and how nuanced they are, and then use my reach and use my platform and say, hey, you might like to follow this person, you might like to learn from this person,
Yeah.
and to try to leverage that in that way. I think that's one of the best ways that I can be of service to people.
Well, to just again to reflect back at just like working and amplifying the highest levels of your energy is like that's what that Capricorn is. Like if I can just like have you recognize that with the Capricorn at the highest elevation is not a sense of duty, but now it's a sense of social responsibility.
Mm.
Right.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so amplifying other people's voices. And then what you said at your root of being just the teacher who's here to ignite curiosity, it's like, oh, now you're curious about this. Like go follow that
Yeah.
person, go hire that person, go work with that person. And that's so beautiful. Because, you know, the Capricorn energy, you do need a challenge, right? And then, of course, it's like recognizing, oh, did I create this unintentional challenge that just like this mind garbage in my head? Because,
Hmm.
like, Capricorn, it wants to get to the top of the mountain, right? Because
Hmm.
it wants the challenge, right? It doesn't want to like go up just like any old mountain. It wants the hard hill, and it's going to go up like the steepest face, right? Because like that's what the little goat hooves want. But then Pisces, like we still have to honor your intuitive Pisces because
Mm.
Pisces still wants to get up to the top of that mountain, but Pisces wants to get up to that top of mountain to feel like more connected to spirit.
Hmm.
Right. And so
Yeah.
you're bringing both of these two beautiful energies into the world with all of these things that you're creating, that you had to go through all these experiences to bring it all together. And it just is so beautiful. So I wanted to maybe our the last question, I wanted to talk about, because I have you here in Pisces season and you've been working with so much with intuitive eating in your work that you offer to others, but I wanted to ask you about intuition and how you are now using that in your life, in your business, in social
Hmm.
media, and everything.
Yeah, it's really funny because despite having all of this Capricorn energy, and Capricorn is, known for planning and things like that, I am not a planner. And with running a business, that can be really challenging to not know what we're doing at any one time. And I am very much kind of free spirited. And I was talking the other day about making reels and things like that, and I just said to a friend of mine, I admire the people who can sit down and plan 6 months of social media
Oh
content
yeah,
in one
not
one
me.
go.
I don't know anybody like
No,
that.
because if the spirit doesn't move me in that moment, then I don't create, because it's going to ring hollow, or it's going to feel really difficult.
Yeah.
And the same thing would happen when I was food blogging and making a cookbook. It was, some days I wouldn't feel like making any recipes or taking any photos, and I'll tell you what, the days that I forced that, it felt really challenging. So
Hmm.
I try to really honor that part of me in terms of my intuition, or when I feel the inspiration in business. Intuition is still something that I find really challenging to do, because there's definitely a lot of, there's this is the right way, this is the way everybody does it, and so I'm always bumping up against
Mm.
that, and I see the parallels, right? I used to think there was only one way, right way of eating, or one right way of exercising, or being very rigid, and I've learned to become more fluid and flexible, and that feels great.
Yeah.
Now I have those same challenges with business, which is trying to unlearn all of the ways I've been told are that there's only one right way, trying to honor myself in the process, right? Trying to get more in touch with that intuitive side of me as it relates to my business, and bringing it all together in a way that feels really authentic and really nourishing, and allows me to impact the world, and do it in a way that doesn't exhaust me, drain me.
Well, I think that's a beautiful example, like in terms of like going back again to your core energies, right? Like the Capricorn thing, like we can get stuck in this idea of like, oh, I need a plan, I need a plan, I need a plan. But then your Pisces sun is like, no, I need to go with the flow. But if we remember that Capricorn is about consistency,
Hmm.
all the little steps that we take to achieve our goal. It doesn't necessarily need a giant plan as long as we know that, okay, I'm going to consistently show up when spirit inspires me. Because,
Hmm.
like, ultimately, your sun has to work with your moon, and your moon needs a lot of rest. Right. Your
Hmm.
moon needs a lot of freedom in the 12th house with that Capricorn, even though it's still Capricorn. It wants to feel and we wants to recognize, and people see you as a success, right? That's also the Capricorn rising part. So, I see that now that you're recognizing those triggers, like, oh, am I gonna like fall back in that hole again? It's like, oh no,
Yeah.
I've been in that hole too many times. We're gonna go around it this time. I don't need you anymore. Tap into intuition, tap
Mhm.
into ritual, tap into all of that. So, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Steph. Any last things that you might want to share with the luminaries that are listening before
Yeah.
we sign off?
I think the one of the biggest lessons that I learned is self-compassion and how applicable and important that is in not only making positive changes in your health and well-being, but just going through life in a pandemic and all of the things that we've been facing, and how so many of us have learned, like our learned way of trying to get motivate ourselves to make change in whatever area it is we want to make change in our lives is through being really harsh, through negative self-talk, through and even up into things like shame, and how even the research shows that that is not motivating. And so if you are listening to this and you're thinking, I do want to make a change with my nutrition, or I do want to make a change with getting more movement in my day, or I do want to explore strength training, is to really get grounded in the reasons why you want to nourish yourself and what that could mean, or have compassion and kindness for yourself for, making it through, still like surviving through a pandemic, even if it wasn't perfect and it has been hard and you weren't able to do the things you used to do, or life has changed, or you've experienced loss or grief, or whatever it is that's been really challenging for you. I know a lot of people, their bodies have changed and they're
Mm.
they're really sad about it. If we choose to shift how we look at it, and I think self-compassion is such a huge piece of that. And it takes support. I think
Yeah.
that's the other thing, having
And a
at
lot of
least.
reminders.
Yes, for sure. It's a practice. When people say things like, "Well, yoga is a practice," but then we don't often give ourselves grace for these other things in life that are a continual practice, and that's truly what it is. So having that grace, having that kindness, ultimately, that is what's going to be the most sustaining.
Oh, you just said it. Compassion as a practice.
Yeah.
Spoken from Steph Gaudreau, Pisces Sun, Capricorn Moon and Rising.
Yeah.
So how can people, where's the best place to find you or work with you? What
Yeah.
are the options for everyone?
Well, I have my website, which is stephgaudreau.com. It kind of hosts and holds all of my things that I have going on, whether it's, how you can get a freebie and kind of get into my world and understand how I teach and who I am. I have a couple of things and options there. Obviously, my podcast, which is free for everybody. So it's the Listen to Your Body podcast. And you've been one of my lovely guests in the past. So definitely come and listen to that episode for sure. And then I have Instagram, which is the platform on social media where I'm the most active. So that's at Steph and then an underscore and then my last name, which is Gaudreau. And you can find all of that linked on my website too. So just would invite people to come and listen. And I've got, different programs depending on what's going on at any given time. So you can explore there are some ways there to work with me as well.
Wonderful. I'll have all of those links for you also in the show notes of thesavvyluminary.com. And oh my gosh, I hope you love Steph as much as I do. I love all of the Pisces-ness. I remember talking to you the other day. I was like, oh, all of your porous Pisces. And you're like, no.
Yes, I am a sponge.
It's so wonderful. And I just love how you're using intuition and bringing in astrology and all of those fun things with
Yeah.
all of your science. So it's beautiful. So
Thank
thank
you.
you, Steph, for joining me today here. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Mahalo for listening to this brand new podcast. If you enjoyed learning about astrology for entrepreneurs, help me spread the word by sharing this podcast with your business besties, and hop over to The Savvy Luminary for links to episode notes and our free Facebook community where you can send me questions about astrology or branding, as well as connect with other like-minded businesses.